Grey clouds hung low over Hürtgen Forest, a dense and forbidding woodland straddling the German-Belgian border. On the damp morning of Thursday, November 16th, 1944, a steady drizzle filtered through the towering fir trees, soaking the ground and chilling the men beneath the canopy. Sporadic artillery fire rumbled in the distance, a grim prelude to the violence to come. Along the forward positions of Lieutenant General Hans Schmidt's 275th Infantry Division, wary German soldiers emerged from their foxholes and bunkers, scanning the forest for any signs of the anticipated American assault. Less than a mile away, the men of the 22nd Infantry Regiment, part of the US Army's 4th Infantry Division, prepared for battle. Riflemen and weapons crews rolled up their damp blankets and ate quick, sombre breakfast under the cover of the trees. The regiment was led by Colonel Charles T. Buck Lanham, a 40-year-old West Point graduate from the class of 1924. Lanham, known for his wiry build and prematurely greying hair, had a reputation as a frontline leader who demanded the same dedication from his officers and men. The 22nd Infantry was tasked with holding a 3-mile stretch of the forest front, part of the larger battle for Hürtgen Forest, a 50-square-mile triangle of dense woodland bordered by Aachen to the west and Düren to the east. This forested battlefield, with its treacherous terrain and bitter weather, was poised to become one of the most grueling and costly campaigns of the war. Shortly after noon on November 16, 1944, the lead companies of the 22nd Infantry Regiment crossed the WWII stream, advancing cautiously through the dense fir-covered terrain. Their objective lay some 5 miles ahead, the Rare River Plain. The operation marked the beginning of a grueling ascent up a forested ridge, where every step brought the men closer to danger. Their war correspondents of the time likened the campaign to Passchendaele with tree bursts. The Hürtgen Forest Campaign, stretching from mid-September 1944 to February 1945, was part of Lieutenant General Courtney Hodges' US First Army's broader effort to cross the Ruhr River and seize critical dams controlling its flow. This would clear the way for a larger assault along the Aachen-Cologne axis, bringing Allied forces closer to the Rhine and ultimately the Ruhr Valley, Germany's industrial heartland. The stakes in the Hürtgen Forest Campaign were high. 2 key dams regulated the Ruhr's water levels, and the Germans could flood the river at will, turning any Allied advance along the Cologne plains into a quagmire. The Allies could not risk such an obstacle while launching their next major offensive. Despite the forest's forbidding terrain, the US command deemed it essential to clear the area to protect the flanks of advancing units. Major General J. Luton Collins, commander of the 7th Corps, justified the costly operation with this quote: "If we would have turned loose off the Hürtgen and let the Germans roam there, they could have hit my flank." The decision set stage for some of the fiercest combat of the war, as American troops faced not only entrenched German defenders, but also nature's own obstacle-dense woods, mud, and relentless cold. In their haste to push into Germany, American commanders underestimated the formidable challenges posed by the Hürtgen Forest, a rugged expanse of dense trees, steep ravines, and limited roads. Neither Lieutenant General Courtney Hodges of the First Army nor Major General J. Luton Collins of the 7th Corps initially prioritised capturing the hydroelectric and flood control dams within the forest. These dams, critical for regulating the Ruhr's river water levels, remained under German control, leaving any Allied advance across the river vulnerable to catastrophic flooding. The significance of these dams became clear only after several divisions had already fought grueling battles within the forest's treacherous confines. Inside the Hürtgen Forest, German defences were formidable. Well-entrenched troops from General Erich Brandenberger's 7th Army, General Gustav Adolf von Zanger's 15th Army, and General Hasso von Mantussel, 5th Panzer Army, manned strongholds supported by 1,000 concealed artillery pieces and ample ammunition. Their defensive strategy exploited the terrain, creating a deadly labyrinth for the advancing American forces. From September 1944, US troops faced relentless enemy fire, unforgiving terrain, and the onset of a harsh winter weather. The campaign began with Major General Maurice Rose's 3rd Armoured Division, which fought initial engagements but struggled to penetrate the forest. The 9th and 28th Infantry Divisions followed, joined by numerous support units, yet they made little headway against the German pillboxes and bunkers. Reinforcements were sent into the fray, including the 1st, 8th, and 78th and 83rd Infantry Divisions and the 5th Armoured Division, then the 505th and the 517th Parachute Infantry Regiments and the 2nd Ranger Battalion, led by Lieutenant Colonel James Earl Rudder, famed for his leadership at Point de Hoc on D-Day. The opening assaults proved ill-conceived, reflecting poorly on senior American commanders. The initial objective of protecting Collins' right flank was limited in scope, and it took weeks of bitter fighting before they fully appreciated the strategic importance of the rear dams. The Germans understood the value of the forest. Its loss would jeopardise their entire defensive line west of the Rhine. For the Allies, what began as a supporting operation devolved into a costly battle of attrition, with no swift breakthrough in sight. The American High Command made a critical misstep by not adopting a simple strategy, bypassing the Hürtgen Forest to seize the rear dams from the southeast before clearing the challenging terrain downstream. Instead, the offensive forced US troops into a tactical quagmire, but the Germans held the advantage. The defenders skillfully delayed the Americans and inflicted heavy casualties, gaining precious time to prepare for their planned Ardennes offensive. The battle began disastrously for the Americans. On October 6, 1944, two US regiments launched an attack, only to find themselves bogged down. After 5 days of fierce combat, they advanced less than a mile to the forest's first clearing. The 9th Infantry Division took another 10 days of intense fighting to gain an additional mile. Suffering nearly 5,000 casualties in the process, reinforcements including Major General Norman Coater's battle-weary 28th Infantry Division entered the forest, but progress remained slow, and losses continued to mount. General Hodges, known for his inflexibility, delayed authorising airstrikes on the rear dams until late November. When the bombers finally arrived, their efforts were insufficient. The massive concrete structures withstood the attacks with minimal damage. It was not until December 13th, 3 months after the first American soldiers entered Hürtgen Forest, that ground forces launched an assault on the dams. Full control over these strategic points was only achieved in February 1945, allowing the Allies to finally secure the east bank of the Ruhr River. The Hürtgen Forest Campaign became a grueling foot soldiers' fight. The rugged terrain, steep ridges, deep ravines, and dense woods combined with relentless rain, mud, sleet, and snow neutralised the American superiority in armour and air power. Tanks could only be deployed late into the battle, leaving much of the fighting to infantrymen. The campaign, which ultimately drew in the elements of 17 US divisions, resulted in staggering casualties, diminished morale, and ranks as one of the most costly and grueling operations the US Army faced in World War II. Despite the overwhelming odds, the infantrymen persevered through sheer determination. Riflemen, machine gunners, and mortar crews bore the brunt of the fighting, facing one of the war's harshest tests. The Hürtgen Forest Campaign remains a sobering chapter in US military history, marked by severe losses and hard lessons. Among the units that endured the brutal fighting were the Double Deuces of the 22nd Infantry Regiment. Part of Major General Raymond O. Barton's 4th Infantry Division, the regiment had landed at Utah Beach on D-Day, 6th of June 1944, and endured heavy casualties during the Normandy campaign. Despite the toll, its morale remained high. Regimental Captain William S. Boyce described the 22nd Infantry as a fighting machine trained to an efficiency not matched at any time during the war. This reputation for toughness would be tested to its limits in Hürtgen Forest. Like many units engaged in Hürtgen Forest, the 22nd Infantry Regiment, nicknamed the Double Deuces, endured far longer and suffered far heavier casualties than expected. Within just 3 days of entering the battle, the regiment lost all 3 of its battalion commanders, while rifle company officers experienced an attrition rate exceeding 300%. On November 20th alone, the regiment suffered a 50% casualty rate, and by the end of the night, its rifle companies had lost over 40% of their strength. Nevertheless, under the leadership of Colonel Charles T. Lanham, the Double Deuces pressed on for another 12 grueling days. Despite significant artillery support, the regiment paid a steep price for limited gains. Over 18 continuous days of combat, the Double Deuces advanced just 6,000 yards at a cost of 2,678 casualties. So for every 2 yards gained, 1 soldier fell. And by the battle's end, the regiment's casualty rate had climbed to an astonishing 82% of its original strength of 3,257 men. The German defenders, entrenched and heavily armed, were relentless. Among their 1,000 concealed weapons were mortars and artillery, including guns positioned near the town of Düren. These wreaked havoc on American forces advancing through the dense forest. Tree-burst artillery shells detonating in the crowns of towering 100-foot fir trees added to the horror, sending deadly showers of shrapnel and splintered wood raining down on soldiers below. Foxholes provided scant shelter from this vertical bombardment, and mines further complicated the chaos. White tape marking cleared paths often disappeared, swept away by wind or buried under snow and mud. When US tanks and other armoured vehicles finally joined the fight, they encountered significant obstacles. Minefields and dense tree cover forced armour to remain on narrow, muddy logging trails and roads, and these routes were often mined, and a single disabled vehicle could block an entire column, leaving the infantry without critical support. The Hürtgen Forest proved to be a hellish environment where progress came at a staggering cost. These conditions, combined with German resistance, tested the limits of American soldiers' resolve. The disastrous Hürtgen Forest Campaign has largely faded from public memory, overshadowed by high-profile failures such as Operation Market Garden in September 1944 and the dramatic Battle of the Bulge from December 1944 to January 1945. While these events are widely remembered, the Hürtgen Forest Campaign, with its grueling battles and catastrophic losses, occupies only a brief space in memoirs and has been overlooked by many historians. I personally only really know about it from some maps in video games, but the researching into it really did open my eyes to the chaos and massive casualties that were suffered there. And when the guns finally fell silent, the Americans had little to show for their immense sacrifice. Only a few miles of shattered forest and a handful of ruined villages. The appalling casualty rates led many participants and senior officers to question whether the campaign had been necessary at all. According to Lieutenant Colonel Frank L. Gunn, commander of the 2nd Battalion 39th Infantry Regiment, the Hürtgen Forest could have been contained rather than assaulted, and a large flanking or encircling movement performed by the corps. This would have reduced the casualties and would still have accomplished the mission of capturing the dams on the Ruhr River. Lieutenant William Burke of the 803rd Tank Destroyer Battalion shared a similar prospect. Some of us with combat experience from the beaches to Hürtgen were hard-pressed to understand the tactical wisdom of slogging it out in such an unforgiving environment instead of bypassing it. Even the German commanders found the campaign baffling. The German command could not understand the reason for the strong American attacks in the Hürtgen Forest. Major General Rudolf von Gersdorf recalled that the fighting in the Hürtgen Forest seemed absolutely insane. It denied the American troops the advantage offered to them by their air and armoured superiority, which had been decisive in all their victories previously. Ultimately, the Hürtgen Forest Campaign remains a sobering example of strategic miscalculation. The harsh terrain, combined with unrelenting German resistance, turned the battle into a costly stalemate. Both the decision-making behind the operation and its devastating consequences continue to spark debate among military historians. Despite the widespread criticism of the Hürtgen Forest Campaign a costly strategic misstep, the courage and resilience of the American infantrymen remains undeniable. For 3 grueling months, US troops endured unimaginable hardships, yet somehow managed to maintain unit cohesion and continue to fight. While the High Command faced justifiable scrutiny, the heroism of the USGI in the foxholes cannot be questioned at all. The battle for the Hürtgen Forest was an absolute nightmare in terms of manpower casualties. From an original strength of 120,000 US forces, around 33,000 were casualties with 12,000 dead, and from the 80,000 German forces there, around 28,000 casualties with 12,000 dead as well. These are massive casualty figures for both sides, and really showed the ferocity of the fighting. I hope you enjoyed the video anyway. I've really enjoyed bringing this one to you. I knew very little about this kind of the battle in the Hürtgen Forest, and also didn't realise how brutal it was. And I think it's overlooked by many people, especially myself. But hopefully this video has taught you a few lessons, you've learned a bit more, and will encourage you to do some research and look into this very interesting battle itself. Anyway, thanks for watching everyone. I hope you have a fantastic evening.